It started with rain, the kind that smells like wet metal and hums with distant thunder. I sat on my porch with a cup of bitter coffee, watching the water blur the river's edge. Sundays had become quieter since my wife passed, just me, the river, and the old dog that never barks anymore. My son, Mark, called around too. His voice cracked like he was trying too hard not to sound panicked. "Dad," he said, "Claire's gone weird. She took Chloe and stormed out. Something about not being trusted. She left her phone at home." I'd learned long ago that when a man says, "gone weird," what he means is something's breaking, but I don't want to admit it yet. Claire, my daughter-in-law, had been part of our family for 10 years. Sweet smile, nervous laugh, always brought those store-bought pies she pretended were homemade. But beneath that polite veneer was a kind of sharpness I never trusted. The kind that hides its edge until it needs to cut. I told Mark to come over, but he said no. "I'll handle it," he muttered. "Just needed to tell someone." That was when I heard it, the sound of an engine near the riverbank. Not a car, but a smaller, higher hum, like the outboard of a motorboat. I looked through the rain and saw a figure in a pale coat standing on the dock. Could have been anyone, but I'd know that posture anywhere, Claire's. She was holding something. Small, dark, rectangular. A case. My chest went tight. I don't know why, but my instincts started screaming before my thoughts caught up. She bent down, glanced around, and with one smooth motion, tossed the case into the river. The splash was swallowed by the rain. She turned and walked back toward her car, shoulders stiff, like someone who'd just buried a secret. I didn't move. Just watched the river swallowing that ripple hole. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe it was garbage. Maybe just something broken. But the truth whispered back. People don't drive in the rain to throw away trash. By the time I reached the dock, she was gone. The water churned gently where the case had disappeared, brown and alive. I stood there in the drizzle, listening to the river's slow breath. The current pulled east, toward the bend where the old sawmill used to stand, a place we all avoided since a kid drowned there years ago. When I got back home, the house felt heavier. The clock ticked louder. Mark texted. She came back, said she needed space. "Chloe's fine. Everything's fine." Everything was never fine when people said it like that. I couldn't let it go. I sat by the window for hours, staring at the river. The rain had stopped, but the current still carried that faint shimmer of moonlight. I thought about my wife, how she used to say the river remembers everything. Every word, every lie, everything we think we've hidden. That night I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of that case sinking through muddy water, spinning slowly, hitting the bottom with a dull thud. I dreamed it wasn't a case at all, but a coffin. And when I reached to open it, something inside reached back. I woke before dawn, sweating, the dog growling low beside the bed. The house was silent except for the river outside. I sat up, poured a drink I shouldn't have, and told myself it wasn't my business. Claire and Mark could deal with their own mess. But around 6, a text came through, from a number I didn't recognize. "You saw it, didn't you?" No name. No context. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. "Who is this?" No answer. The message sat there on the screen like a fingerprint you can't wash off. I deleted it, then emptied the trash folder, old habit from my years working security. But the damage was done. Curiosity had already bitten down. When the first light hit the river, I went down to the dock again. The planks creaked like they knew my weight by memory. I stared into the water where Claire had stood, watching the current curl and twist. Something told me that whatever she'd thrown away wasn't meant to be found. And that was enough reason for me to find it. The next morning came gray and heavy, the kind of day that doesn't start so much as it leaks in through the windows. I barely slept. My thoughts kept circling the same point, Claire, the case, and that text message like a nail tapping the same spot in my skull. By 8, the river had calmed, and so had I, or so I told myself. I grabbed my old boots, the ones I used to wear when Mark and I went fishing. The leather was cracked, the laces stiff, but they felt like armor. I told the dog I'd be right back, though I think we both knew I was lying. Down by the dock, the air was thick with that muddy smell of silt and roots. The current was slower now, pulling softly toward the bend. I crouched and watched the water for a while, hoping for a glimpse of something out of place. Nothing. Just a piece of driftwood and a couple of plastic bottles caught in the reeds. That's when I saw it, a faint glint below the surface, about 10 feet out. Not bright, not steady, but a flash like sunlight catching metal. My heart kicked once hard. I didn't think. I just stripped off my jacket and waded in. The water was colder than I'd expected. It clawed at my legs, thick and unforgiving. I went in slow, step by step, until the mud tried to suck me down. My breath came short. I could see it now, something square, wedged between two rocks at the bottom. I reached, slipped, cursed, then lunged again and grabbed it. The weight nearly pulled me under. When I staggered back onto the dock, drenched and shaking, I laid it down. A small black case. Metal corners. Latches rusted shut. My hands were trembling as I pried at one with my keys. It snapped open with a hiss of stale air. Inside was paper. Dozens of folded sheets, each wrapped in plastic. Receipts. Notes. A notebook with a leather cover swollen from the water. And under all that, an envelope with my name written in Claire's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened it. "If you're reading this," it began, "then you already know I had to do it. I never wanted to hurt anyone, least of all you. But what's inside this case isn't just mine. It's yours, too. It always was. No signature, no explanation. Just that, and at the bottom, a water-blurred phone number." I felt the blood drain from my face. The case wasn't hers. It was something we shared. Something I'd forgotten, or buried. I flipped through the papers. Names. Amounts. Transfers. Some looked like legitimate invoices, others, coded entries that made no sense. But one detail struck like a hammer, a list of dates, all circled, all corresponding to the months before my wife's death. I don't remember sitting down, but I was suddenly on the dock, the wood slick beneath me, the papers spread out like fallen leaves. The ledger was written in a hand I recognized, mine. My old handwriting from years back, when I managed accounts for a construction firm. The company had gone under after an audit I never fully understood. And now, here it was, evidence, preserved by someone who shouldn't have had it. Claire had known. Somehow, she'd gotten hold of the old financial records. But why throw them away now? What had she discovered that made her so desperate to erase it? I drove straight to Mark's house. He opened the door still in his robe, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "Dad, what the hell happened to you?" he asked, taking in the soaked clothes and mud-caked boots. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the case. He frowned. What is that?" "Something Claire tried to hide," I said. "And something I should have told you a long time ago." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten Thanksgiving dinners and watched my grandson spill juice on placemats shaped like turkeys. Now it felt like a courtroom. I told him everything, about the case, the note, the handwriting, the papers. His face changed as I spoke, shifting from confusion to disbelief, then to something colder. "You're saying she had your old company's records?" he said. "Yes. And not just that, she knew about the missing funds." He blinked. "What missing funds?" I hesitated. The truth had been buried for years, but now it clawed its way up like a corpse from the riverbed. Before the company went under, some money disappeared. Enough to ruin people. I was blamed for it, though nothing was ever proven. I thought it was over. Mark's jaw clenched. "You think Claire found something?" "I don't think." "I know." I handed him one of the waterlogged pages. "She's been digging. And she must have found something she shouldn't have." He pushed the paper back. "Dad, that was 20 years ago. Why would she care?" That was the question, wasn't it? Why would she care? Unless someone else cared, and she got caught in the middle. Later that evening, as the rain started again, I went back through the envelope. There was a second sheet I hadn't noticed before, folded inside the flap. A name and an address, written in thick, deliberate pen. M. Roth, 1260 Riverside Storage, Unit 7. I didn't know the name, but I knew the place. The old storage units near the highway, half abandoned since the flood 5 years ago. I sat in the car staring at it until the dashboard light flickered off. My heart was pounding in that quiet, steady rhythm of something too big to ignore. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. Someone else was pulling the strings, and I was already tangled in them. I sat in the car for a long time after finding that note, engine off, the only sound the tick of cooling metal and rain tapping the windshield. Riverside Storage. Unit 7. A place that hadn't meant anything for years suddenly pulsed with meaning. I could have called the sheriff. Could have told Mark everything. But men like me, we don't trust the law when it comes to family. We trust our instincts, and mine were screaming that if Claire had risked hiding something there, she wasn't working alone. I drove out before dawn. The highway was slick and empty, the fog hanging low like it wanted to hide what I was about to do. Riverside Storage sat at the edge of town, chain-link fence sagging, half the units rusted shut, the sign missing its S, so it read River ID in faded blue letters. The gate was locked with a padlock that had seen better days. I used my old lockpick kit, a remnant from my security job years ago. It clicked open with a soft metallic sigh. The sound made me feel 20 years younger, and 10 times more guilty. Unit 7 was halfway down the row. The numbers were painted in red, half worn off, the doors streaked with rust. When I lifted the shutter, it groaned like something waking from a long sleep. The air inside was damp and stale, heavy with the smell of paper and oil. At first, I saw nothing special. Old furniture boxes stacked high, a couple of tools on a workbench. Then, in the back corner, under a tarp, I saw another case, bigger this time, metal, with a combination lock. My stomach dropped. The numbers 3-1-2-5 were faintly scratched into the latch. I tried them. It clicked open. Inside, more documents. Contracts. Letters. And photographs. Dozens of them. I spread them out on the table, my flashlight trembling over the images. They were of Claire. Talking to a man I didn't recognize. Older, gray hair, expensive coat. Some taken at restaurants, others near what looked like a bank. In a few, she was holding envelopes, the same kind that had been in the first case. But one photo stopped me cold. It was Claire, standing in front of my wife's grave. The timestamp in the corner read June 8th, the anniversary of my wife's death. I felt something in me go still. There was also a folder labeled Barton and Company Holdings, my old firm. I opened it, and froze again. Bank statements. Transfers made under my name, long after I'd left the company. Someone had kept my credentials alive, using them to move money quietly, bit by bit. Claire wasn't just digging, she was cleaning up. And whoever M. Roth was, they were using her to do it. The phone number from Claire's letter burned in my pocket. I dialed it. It rang once, then twice. "Who is this?" a man's voice said, calm and smooth, like someone who didn't need to shout to make you listen. "You left a number," I said. "In a letter Claire wrote." There was a pause. Then a faint chuckle. "Ah. You must be the father-in-law. Where's Claire?" I asked. "She's safe," he said. "Safer than you think. But you shouldn't have gone to the river." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, heart thudding. That voice, something about it scratched at memory. I went through the folder again and found a business card tucked in the back. M. Roth, Senior Partner, Barton and Company Holdings. The man who'd owned the company when everything fell apart. The man I hadn't seen in 20 years. The pieces started snapping together like cruel magnets. Claire had discovered the company's hidden accounts. She must have confronted Roth, and when it got dangerous, she tried to get rid of the evidence. But Roth didn't want it gone, he wanted it back. And now he knew I had it. I drove home through the fog, mind racing. Mark called halfway there, asking where I'd been. I lied. Told him I went for a drive. He didn't believe me, he never was a good liar, and neither was I. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the evidence. 2 cases. 2 sets of lies. 1 dead woman. 1 missing daughter-in-law. And a man from my past who just stepped back into my life. I thought of my wife, her soft laugh, her trust in me when everything collapsed back then. I'd promised her I'd leave that world behind. But ghosts don't stay buried when money's involved. For a while, I considered burning everything. But then I thought of Claire's letter. It's yours too. It always was. Maybe she meant guilt. Maybe she meant justice. Either way, it was mine to finish. So I made a decision. If Roth wanted his secrets back, he'd have to come and get them. And I'd be ready. I opened the drawer, pulled out my old revolver, and checked the chamber. 5 bullets. Plenty for truth. Roth answered the second time I called. His voice was colder now, like someone who'd been waiting for the river to hand back what belonged to him. You have something that isn't yours, he said. No greeting. No small talk. Just a fact laid out like a verdict. You stole from people, I said before I thought about it. The words sounded rough coming out of me. I'd practiced them in the dark 100 times since I found the case, but saying them aloud made the room tilt. There was a soft, almost amused sigh from the other end. You and I both know how the world works, old man. Money moves. People move it. Some lose. Some find. Claire, she's a useful cleaner. She forgets what she should and remembers what she shouldn't. You should have left it alone. She threw it in the river, I said. She destroyed evidence. You don't understand the ledger's value, Roth said. It's not evidence the way cops read it. It's leverage. It's history. It's a key. Keys get returned. Or doors get broken. I hung up. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the sink to steady myself. Roth had always been slippery, charming at meetings, ruthless in accounts. I'd seen him laugh and then watch a man lose his home. He was the kind of man who believed some people were expendable because he decided their worth. That night, 2 black SUVs rolled up outside Mark's place. I saw them through the kitchen window. The headlights split the backyard like a searchlight. Men got out, 2 of them, tall and straight, expensive coats hanging off shoulders like weapons. They walked up to the door, and Claire opened it. She didn't see me at first. She never ever had the look she had then, hollow, like someone who'd been turned inside out and sewn back up wrong. She spoke with a clipped politeness I recognized from people who'd been coached. When she saw the men at the door, she blinked and then shut the door faster than politeness would ever allow. Mark met them in the driveway. I could hear him from the kitchen through the thin walls, his voice trying to be reasonable. There's the practiced calm of professionals. They left after 20 minutes. Wallets out, polite nods, a line about business and old matters. One of the men gave Mark a card with the Barton and Company crest. Roth's crest. The same hands that had shaken mine years ago, the same smile that had closed deals and closed mouths. After they left, Claire went to the bedroom and shut the door. Mark stood at the sink and put his head in his hands. I wanted to go in, to tell him everything, to tell him the ledger and the photos and the phone call. But I watched him and remembered how fragile he'd been since the funeral, how quick to protect, how slow to accuse. Dad? He said finally, eyes red. If she's involved with them, if she was cleaning up for Roth, what do we do? What we should have done 20 years ago, I said. We make sure the truth comes out. We don't let rich men buy silence. He nodded, but I could see the confusion. It's different to hear it from me than to believe it. My reputation had long ago been shaded by whispers about the company collapse. People forget kindness and remember the rumor that sticks. That week the town felt smaller, like a fishbowl made of gossip. Neighbors who'd waved at me now avoided eye contact. The church ladies who used to bring casseroles after my wife's funeral offered platitudes from the other side of the parking lot. The ledger's presence had widened into something corrosive, suspicion. I decided to meet Roth in his world. I called the number that had been on the card the man left at Mark's door and asked for a meeting. I was careful, no threats, no accusations. Just a polite demand for answers. Roth agreed to see me at an office downtown, in a building with glass so reflective you could see yourself twice over. He ushered me into a room that smelled of lemon polish and old money. He was older than the photos, lines deeper, hair thinner, but he still carried the same slow confidence. "You found the record," he said. "I see that. An awkward thing, the past. It resurfaces." He offered me coffee I didn't take. "Why did Claire throw it away?" "She's not an idiot." "She was scared," I said. "She thought if it went away, so would the trouble." Roth's eyes narrowed. "People do strange things when they're frightened. But you, why dig? Why risk your family?" "Because it's not just about me," I said. "Those papers show people were hurt. People lost homes. My wife, she died with bills we couldn't pay. You profited." A muscle in his jaw moved. "We all pay costs. Business is not morality. But you can't take what's not yours. You shouldn't have meddled." "Meddled?" I spat. "You stole from our community. You took from the weak and made it vanish behind numbers." He leaned forward, voice soft as a scalpel. "You want justice, old man? You want a reckoning? You think the law will save you? The law is a tool. Very blunt. Very public. Very messy. What I offer is cleanup. Quiet. Discreet." "You offered Claire cleanup?" I asked. "You saw what she did," he said. "She panicked. People in panic do foolish things. I had men collect what was lost to keep it from hurting others more. You found it. That changes things." He stood then, upright and unhurried. "Let me be clear. Return what you have. Walk away. Your family will be fine. Claire will be fine. Or you can make this public, file complaints, get subpoenas, drag fingers into folders that were meant to stay closed. That path is messy. It will cost your son, your daughter, your grandson more than you can imagine." I felt something cold and sharp press against the back of my neck. Fear made flesh. Roth was offering me a choice masked as mercy. Leave it alone and live, or fight and risk burning what remained of my family. I left his office without a promise. Outside, the city looked indifferent. People rushed to trains, to coffees, to lives that did not concern themselves with what men like Roth arranged. When I drove home that evening, I passed the river and slowed. The water moved on, uncaring. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Roth had drawn a line and left me on the other side. But the ledger sat in my drawer. The photos lay under a photograph of my wife. The memory of the case in the river kept pulling at me like a tide. I had a choice: hide the ledger and pretend the river had done the job, or use it as a lamp to find every dark corner Roth had lit. I chose the lamp. I didn't sleep that night. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady ticking of the clock over the stove. It felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. I kept seeing Roth's face, calm, unshaken, the way men look when they believe they own the world and the people in it. By morning, I'd made my choice. I wasn't going to hand the ledger back. I was going to expose him. I called an old friend from my security days, Pete Cavanaugh. He'd retired to a smaller town but still had contacts in the State Bureau. The kind who liked digging into old white-collar ghosts. When I told him what I had, he went quiet for a long time. "Jesus, Hank," he said finally. "That company was a hornet's nest. You sure you want to stir it now?" "I already did," I said. "And they know it." He whistled low. "All right. Send me copies. Not the originals. Keep those safe. Somewhere no one would think to look. I scanned the papers that morning, every creased page trembling in my hands. When I finished, I drove to the bank and rented a safe deposit box under Chloe's name, something innocent, tucked away. Then I'd burn the copies at home, just in case anyone was watching. 2 days later, Roth's men came back. They didn't knock this time. I saw their shadows before I heard the door open. Heavy boots, low voices. The dog barked once and then whimpered away. "Mr. Lawson," one of them said, his tone polite but dead. "We'll make this simple. Return what's ours. Tell Roth he can have his own sins." I said. "Not mine." The man smiled thinly, like I told a decent joke. Then he nodded toward the hallway, where another man held up a photo of Mark and Chloe at the park. My stomach turned to stone. "People get hurt over misunderstandings," he said softly. "Let's not make this one bigger." They left without taking anything, but the message was clear: we can reach them. That night, I drove out to Mark's place. Claire was gone, again. Mark said she'd left a note saying she needed time. I didn't have the heart to tell him what kind of time she'd probably bought. He looked at me with that same haunted confusion I'd once worn myself. "Dad, did you do something?" he asked. I wanted to lie, but lies were what got us here. "Yeah," I said. "I did. And it's going to hurt before it helps." He stared at me, jaw tight. "You think you're protecting us, but you're digging up graves. Sometimes that's the only way to bury the right man," I said quietly. A week passed. Pete called with updates. The Bureau had opened an investigation into Roth's holdings. He said the ledgers matched other evidence they'd been chasing for years: shell companies, ghost accounts, offshore transfers. "You just lit a fuse," Pete told me. "Keep your head down." But Roth wasn't the kind of man who waited for explosions. He lit his own. On a Thursday morning, a story broke in the local paper, anonymous sources accusing me of being the mastermind behind the old Barton and Company scandal. They had evidence linking my name to forged documents, stolen funds, and a mysterious missing witness, Claire Lawson. Mark called, furious. "You brought this on us," he shouted over the phone. "Now they're saying Claire's in hiding because of you." "I know what they're saying," I told him. "And I know who's feeding them. Dad, you're obsessed. You can't fix the past by ruining what's left of us." The line went dead. That night, I sat in the dark and listened to the rain again. Funny how it always came when things went bad, as if the sky couldn't stand to stay dry while people tore each other apart. I poured myself a drink and watched the river crawl by outside. At dawn, I found a car parked across the street. Same make as Roth's men drove. I didn't approach, just watched. After half an hour, it pulled away. I followed. They went east, past the sawmill bend, to the same spot where Claire had thrown the case. I stopped 100 yards back, hidden behind trees. There were 2 of them. They carried something heavy wrapped in a tarp. It was long and narrow. They weighted it with stones and rolled it into the water. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stared. Later, when the sun burned through the clouds, I walked down to that same dock. The current had already taken it. Another secret swallowed. But when I looked down at the wet sand near the bank, I saw something half buried. A wallet. Claire's. Inside was a photo of Chloe and a folded receipt, dated 3 days ago, from a motel outside town. Room 14. Hope can be cruel. It blooms even when reason says it shouldn't. I drove there that afternoon. The clerk said she'd checked out early, left in a hurry, but had left an envelope for me. No name, just the River Man. Inside was a note. "I did what I had to. They wanted you blamed. I tried to stop it. Don't look for me. Protect Mark and Chloe. Burn the rest." No signature, but I knew the handwriting. I sat there in the car until the paper blurred. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, exhausted kind that comes from too much truth and not enough forgiveness. By the time I drove home, sirens were wailing in the distance. The news came hours later. Barton and Company's accounts had been frozen, and warrants issued for Roth's arrest. My name was cleared, but Claire's wasn't mentioned. Not once. She'd become another invisible casualty, a ghost in the margins of someone else's justice. That night, I walked to the river one last time. The water glimmered under the streetlights, slow and dark. Somewhere beneath it lay the case that started everything. Somewhere out there, Claire was alive. Or not. I threw her note into the water. Watched it curl, sink, and vanish. The river remembers everything. But it never tells. The morning the news broke, the town woke up to sirens. Not the kind that warn you to run, but the kind that make you look out the window and realize someone powerful just fell. M. Roth, executive of Barton and Company. Arrested on multiple counts of fraud, racketeering, and witness tampering. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, like she was reading a grocery list instead of a man's ruin. I watched the footage on my old TV. Roth in a gray suit, silver cuffs gleaming. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just looked at the cameras, eyes flat and cold, the way a man does when he's already planning his appeal. Pete called within the hour. "You did it, Hank." The ledgers lined up. Offshore accounts, dummy firms, the whole rotten tree. "He's done." I didn't feel victory, just the echo of it. Justice, it turns out, doesn't feel like fire. It feels like a draft through an open door. By noon, reporters were calling. Neighbors came by pretending they just wanted to check in. Some shook my hand, others looked at me like I'd dragged their dirty laundry into the street. In a way, I had. Roth had paid half this town once. Sponsorships, donations, soft loans that came from stolen pockets. Everyone had fed on the same poisoned well. That evening I drove to Mark's house. He didn't answer at first. When he finally opened the door, he looked older, eyes sunken, hair uncombed. "They called me from the station," he said. "They want me to testify. About Claire." My throat went dry. "What about her?" "They found her car outside the old quarry," he said quietly. "Keys still in the ignition. No body yet." I stood there, hard hammering. "No. She's alive. She left me a note." He looked away. "Then pray you're right." The following days were a blur of hearings and headlines. Roth's lawyers tried to paint him as the victim of a vendetta, a bitter ex-employee twisting old records. But the Bureau had numbers that didn't lie, and Pete made sure every shred of proof I'd given him saw daylight. One afternoon I got a message, no name, just coordinates and 3 words. She kept one copy. I drove there without thinking, an abandoned chapel on the outskirts, ivy crawling up its broken windows. Inside, the air smelled of dust and candle wax. On the altar sat a small waterproof case identical to the first one. Inside, another ledger. This one newer, cleaner, written in Claire's hand. She hadn't run. She'd been documenting everything, every transfer Roth ordered after the first scandal, every payoff, every threat. Her handwriting was steady until the last pages, where it turned frantic. "They know I talked. If anything happens, the river will remember for me." My knees gave out. I sat there on the cold stone floor and read until my eyes blurred. That night, I gave the second ledger to Pete. He didn't ask where I'd found it. He just nodded and said, "She bought us proof. And bought you peace." Peace. That's a word people use when they don't know what else to say. Weeks passed. Roth pleaded guilty to reduced charges. Turns out even monsters know when they're cornered. His empire collapsed like wet paper. The papers called it the River Ledger case. Some journalist even called me the whistleblower grandfather. I hated that. Whistleblowers get applause. I'd only ever wanted quiet. One evening, I drove back to the dock. The sky was turning the color of tarnished coins. I threw a handful of pebbles into the water and watched the ripples fade. The river didn't look guilty. It never does. It just carries what we feed it. Mark came up behind me. "They're closing the investigation," he said. "Claire's officially presumed dead." I nodded. "She saved us, Mark. You, Chloe, everyone. Don't let her name vanish." He slipped his hand on my shoulder. "I won't. But you should let the river have the rest." We stood there a long time, listening to the current. I still keep one thing from that day, the key from the second case. I wear it on a chain under my shirt. A reminder that truth doesn't drown easy, even when people do. Sometimes at night I hear the water against the banks, slow and heavy, like breathing. I think of Claire's last line, "The river will remember for me." Maybe that's what revenge really is, a memory that refuses to sink. Roth was gone. The papers stopped printing his name after the sentencing, and the town stopped whispering mine once the novelty wore off. People move on faster than you think. They have bills to pay, dinners to cook, gossip to replace. But the silence that follows justice can be louder than the chaos that came before it. The house felt different now. I'd cleared out the drawers, burned the last of the notes, and boxed the ledgers for the bureau's archives. Still, I kept one thing, the small metal case from the river. Empty now, but heavy as memory. It sat on the mantel beside my wife's photo, a reminder of the cost of uncovering what should have stayed buried. Mark didn't visit much those first few months. When he did, we talked about Chloe, her school, her drawings, how she'd started asking about her mother. Kids have a cruel sort of timing. They pick the quietest moments to ask the hardest questions. "Grandpa," she said one afternoon, swinging her legs from the porch step, "why doesn't Mommy come to see me?" I froze. The truth was a fist in my throat. "She's far away," I said finally. "But she loved you more than anything." Chloe frowned. "Mommy said rivers remember things. Is that true?" I looked out at the slow water bending through the trees. "Yeah," I said. "They remember everything. Even love." That night, I couldn't shake her words. I found myself walking down to the dock again, the moon sharp as glass over the current. The river looked calm, but every ripple felt like a heartbeat. I thought of Claire's final note, of the way she tried to save us all and ended up vanishing into the same water that had started it. The next day, Pete came by with a folder. "Closure," he called it. I didn't believe in that word anymore. Inside were official statements, Roth's assets seized, several of his associates charged, restitution funds established for victims. Claire's name appeared only once, in a sealed affidavit. Pete tapped it with his finger. "She gave them everything," he said quietly, "before she disappeared. Without her, none of this sticks." I sat there a long time after he left, staring at the signature that was half smudged from water damage. Claire Lawson. My daughter-in-law. The woman who'd stolen, lied, and finally saved us all. A month later, the town held a memorial by the river. They built a small wooden cross near the dock, white lilies tied to its base. Mark spoke briefly. His voice cracked once, but he finished strong. Chloe released a paper lantern, and for a moment the flame drifted across the water like a soul deciding whether to stay or go. When the others left, I stayed behind. The air smelled of rain again. The river whispered, same as always. I took the empty case from my coat and set it down by the cross. "You did good, kid," I murmured. "You made sure they paid." The wind picked up and carried the words away. That night I dreamed of her. Not as the frightened woman from the motel, but calm, standing at the riverbank in that pale coat, smiling faintly. She said nothing, but her eyes were clear. When I woke, the house felt lighter. Weeks passed into months. Life rebuilt itself in small, stubborn ways. Mark started teaching again. Chloe won a school art prize. The bureau sent me a letter of thanks, though it read like a formality. The ledger became a case file. Roth's name became a footnote. But sometimes, late at night, when the house creaked and the wind shifted, I'd hear a faint splash outside. Always the same spot. Always the same sound, the river remembering. Chloe started painting rivers, too. She said they were alive, that if you looked long enough, you could see faces in the reflections. One of them, she said, looked like her mom. Maybe it did. Justice had come. Revenge had burned itself out. But grief, that stayed. It wasn't sharp anymore, just a quiet ache that reminded me I'd loved something enough to lose it. I've stopped waiting for closure. I don't think we ever get it. What we get is endurance, the ability to keep living even when the water never gives back what it takes. So I go to the river still, once a week, just to listen. To remember the sound of things that won't drown, no matter how deep they sink. A year passed. The seasons had turned twice since the trial, and life pretended to settle. The river froze that winter, something it hadn't done in years. Solid, glassy, like it was tired of carrying other people's sins. Mark finally sold their old house. He and Chloe moved into a smaller place near the edge of town. He said it was for the view, but I knew he just didn't want to keep seeing that dock every morning. I helped him move boxes, the two of us silent most of the day. When we finished, he handed me a small wooden crate. "Mom's things," he said. They were in storage. Inside were photos, jewelry, and a tin box sealed with masking tape. On the lid was a note in Claire's handwriting. "For Dad. Only when the water is still." The words chilled me. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table turning that box in my hands. The tape was brittle. It peeled away with a soft sigh. Inside was a flash drive, wrapped in a strip of plastic. No label. No hint. Just waiting. I didn't trust computers much, so I borrowed Mark's old laptop and opened it offline. There were only 3 files, short videos. The first was dated 2 months before Claire vanished. She sat in a dim motel room, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, you already know Roth isn't done. He's laundering money through new accounts, charities, scholarships. He's untouchable because everyone owes him something. But I have proof. I just don't know who to trust." Her eyes flicked away, nervous. "Mark can't know yet. He'll try to fix it himself. And your father-in-law, he thinks revenge is the same as justice." She smiled faintly. "Tell him it's not. Not really." The second video showed stacks of folders and USBs. "These are backups," she said. "One goes to the bureau, one to the press. If something happens to me, they'll surface. The truth floats. It always floats." The third video was shorter, grainy, recorded the night she disappeared. Headlights flickered outside the window. She looked straight into the camera, whispering, "They're here. If I don't make it, remember the name Alden Trust. It's where the next rot begins." The video cut to static. I sat there for a long time, pulse hammering. Alden Trust. I'd seen that name, on a donation plaque in the town library, and again on the new wing of the children's hospital. Roth's empire wasn't dead, it had just changed names. The next morning I called Pete. He sighed when he heard it. "I figured something like that might happen. Power doesn't vanish, Hank, it migrates. So what do? We keep the evidence quiet for now," he said. "Let me dig. If Alden Trust is dirty, we'll find the cracks." Weeks turned into months again. Life moved, but the unease stayed. I watched Chloe grow, taller, bolder, eyes too old for her age. She still painted rivers, but now there were buildings in the reflections, sharp and cold. One evening, she came to me with a drawing. "Grandpa," she said, "this is Mommy's river. It has secrets." In the picture, beneath the blue surface, she'd drawn boxes, black rectangles sinking through the water. I asked why. "Because Mommy said the river hides what people throw away," she said. "But if you listen, you can hear it trying to give things back." Her words rattled me more than any evidence file ever could. Kids don't know how close they come to truth. That night, the river thawed. Ice cracked like bones splitting, and the current came alive again. I stood on the dock, the wind biting my face, and I could swear I saw something glint beneath the surface, metal catching moonlight, slow and deliberate. I leaned closer, heart thudding. Nothing. Just the water playing tricks. But the doubt wouldn't leave. Maybe Claire wasn't gone. Maybe she'd just done what the river taught her, to disappear when the world stopped listening. I walked home soaked in fog and half-belief. The case on the mantel gleamed faintly under the lamp. For the first time in months, I didn't see it as a grave. I saw it as a signal. The fight wasn't over. Roth's fall was just one branch snapping off a poisoned tree. And somewhere Claire, or what she'd left behind, was still pulling the roots loose. I poured a drink, raised it toward the window, and whispered into the dark. "Keep going, kid! Wherever you are, keep going!" Outside, the river answered with a slow, steady roar. It was Pete who called first. "You were right, Hank. Alden Trust isn't a charity, it's a shell. Roth's money was laundered into it before his arrest, and someone's been using it ever since." "Someone?" I repeated. He hesitated. "A woman. The name on the filings is Claire Roth." The room went still. "That's impossible." "Not legally, apparently. The papers list her as trustee and acting director. Either someone stole her identity, or she's alive." The line went quiet except for the faint hum of the connection. I could hear Pete's chair creak. "I'm sending you the address of a warehouse outside Mill Creek. That's where Alden Trust keeps its shipment records. Thought you might want to see for yourself." It was reckless. It was stupid. But by now, reason had long ago drowned with the rest of it. The warehouse sat alone at the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by a fence half swallowed by weeds. The sky hung low, swollen with rain. A few trucks were parked out front, their engines cooling. I waited until the last set of taillights vanished before crossing the fence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and paper. Boxes upon boxes stacked like tombstones. Each one labeled Alden Trust, Community Outreach. I slit one open with my pocket knife. Inside weren't school supplies or donation receipts. They were ledgers, identical to Roth's. Clean, precise, and deadly. I found a small office at the back, light leaking through blinds. On the desk sat a laptop still logged in, the screen glowing faintly. I scrolled through the files, dozens of transfers from accounts overseas. Money still moving. Still alive. Then I saw a name in the recipient column that made my pulse stop. C. Lawson. My hands started to shake. I opened one of the folders and there she was, Claire. Not a ghost, not a rumor. A recent photo attached to a security clearance file, dated 2 months ago. She looked older, harder. But alive. I barely had time to breathe before I heard footsteps behind me. "You shouldn't be here, Hank." The voice froze me. Soft. Familiar. I turned. She stood in the doorway, raincoat dripping, hair pulled back. Claire. Alive. Real. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she stepped closer, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "I knew you'd find me eventually," she said. "I thought you were dead." "Everyone did," she murmured. "That's how it had to be." I took a slow step forward. "Why? Why this? Alden Trust, your name, these accounts." She exhaled. "Because Roth wasn't the end. He was the face. The money behind Alden? It's the same men who backed him. Old partners. Judges. Politicians. If I testified, they would have buried me for real. So I made a deal." "A deal?" "I took the trust, moved the funds out of their reach, then kept feeding them false reports. Every dollar they send gets rerouted to restitution funds under other names. I'm stealing back what they stole." I stared at her, disbelief warring with all. "You're running the operation from the inside?" She nodded. "For as long as I can. It's dangerous, but it's working. The money's drying up for them. Every month a little less control." "You could have told us," I said quietly. "Mark, Chloe, they think you're gone." Her voice broke. "If they knew I was alive, they'd be targets. You saw what Roth's men did. I couldn't risk it." I wanted to argue, to demand an explanation that would make any of this feel right. But the truth was bigger than anger. Bigger than grief. "You're not coming home, are you?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I needed you to find me, so you'd stop digging where it could get you killed. The river gave you enough." I swallowed hard. "Then why the videos? The flash drive? You wanted me to find them." Her mouth curved in a sad smile. "Because I needed someone I trust to know I was still fighting." Rain pounded the roof like footsteps retreating. She reached into her coat and handed me a small waterproof case, identical to the first one. "Keep this safe," she said. "If something happens, this ends them all. The real names, the real network. Burn it if you have to." "Claire. Please." She cut me off. "For Chloe." The lights flickered. Somewhere outside, an engine revved. Claire's expression changed, alert, tense. "They found me," she whispered. "You need to go. I'm not leaving you again." She grabbed my arm, pushed me toward the back exit. "You'll do more good alive. Go." I stumbled into the rain, clutching the case. Behind me, I heard shouting, men's voices, heavy boots, a single gunshot. Then silence. I didn't look back. I ran until the road curved and the sound of the river filled my ears again. By the time I returned with Pete and the police, the warehouse was burning. Flames clawed at the night, and the smell of fuel hung thick. No sign of Claire. No body. No survivors. Just ashes, and the case still in my hand. Inside it were names, dates, offshore banks, everything she'd promised. Enough to collapse Alden Trust, enough to finish what the river had started. Pete looked at me over the flames. "You think she made it out?" I watched the fire reflect off the water. "If anyone could," I said quietly, "it'd be her." 6 months after the fire, the warehouse was nothing more than twisted metal and blackened dirt. Alden Trust collapsed within weeks of the investigation. Every name in Claire's final case had been verified, every account frozen. Pete told me it was the cleanest takedown he'd seen in 30 years. But justice isn't clean. It leaves smoke in your lungs long after the fire's out. The town tried to move on again. The papers ran one last headline. "Alden Trust linked to Roth Empire. Whistleblower information leads to federal raid." They never mentioned Claire. They called it an anonymous source. Maybe that was better. The living rarely understand what the dead did for them. I rebuilt the porch that spring. Replaced the broken boards. Painted the rail white like my wife used to. Chloe helped, her laughter filling spaces that had gone quiet too long. She was 10 now, curious, stubborn. The kind of stubborn that saves people or ruins them, depending on where it lands. One evening, while she painted the steps, she asked, "Grandpa, did the river ever give you back what you lost?" I looked out at the slow current. "Not exactly," I said. "But it taught me what I needed." She tilted her head. "Like what?" "That some things you pull up aren't meant to be kept. And some things you let go never really leave." She smiled, small and knowing, like she understood more than I said. "Kids often do." After dinner, when the house was quiet, I opened the case one last time. The papers had all been turned over to the bureau, but I'd kept one item, a photograph, half burned, found near the warehouse ruins. It showed the river at sunset, and in the corner, barely visible, the silhouette of a woman in a raincoat. The timestamp was 2 days after the fire. Maybe coincidence. Maybe mercy. I slipped it inside the case and locked it again. Not for secrecy, just respect. Weeks later, I drove out to the dock for the anniversary. The same dock where it all began, the rain, the splash, the first ripple that tore everything open. The air smelled like rain and wild mint, just like that night. I set the empty case on the planks and sat beside it. "I kept my promise," I said aloud. "They paid. Every one of them." The river moved slow, steady. A single leaf drifted by, spinning like a coin deciding its side. I closed my eyes and listened. There it was, the faint hum of water against rock, the sound I'd come to think of as breathing. When I opened my eyes again, something shimmered mid-current, a flash of silver, quick and deliberate. It wasn't light. It wasn't reflection. It was movement. A small metal object surfacing, spinning once before the current took it downstream. Another case. Or maybe the same one. I laughed quietly. All right, I murmured. You win. Some debts can't be settled in money or trials. They settle themselves in stories, in whispers carried by water. I tossed a small coin into the river, a thank you, or maybe an apology. It disappeared instantly, swallowed without ceremony. The next morning, Pete called to tell me Alden Trust's remaining assets had been reallocated to education funds for the town's children. Set up anonymously, but the paperwork bore an odd signature, C. Lawson. I didn't tell him what I'd seen at the river. Some truths are meant to stay private between an old man and the current that's carried his life. That night, as I locked up the house, I caught a reflection in the window, a flicker of a woman's shape by the water, coat fluttering, head bowed. I blinked, and she was gone. But the air smelled like her perfume, faint and sweet. Maybe she'd come to see if I'd kept my word. Maybe she just wanted to be remembered. I sit on the porch most evenings now, the dog at my feet, Chloe's laughter drifting in from the yard. Life, somehow, has grown roots again. The river is quieter these days. But when it rains, when thunder rolls low across the valley, I swear I can hear a voice in it, steady, patient, almost proud. The truth floats. I raise my glass to the water. Yeah, I whisper back. It does. And somewhere beneath that endless current, where secrets sleep and stories wait, the river carries one more name. Claire Lawson. Not lost. Not gone. Just remembered. If this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can continue the journey by clicking the box on the left. Thank you for being here.